I devoted hours to research before embarking on our maiden cruise, scouring the web for every nugget of wisdom. Yet, among the sea of advice, there were some things we didn't learn until we were on board. These are my tips that I didn't learn anywhere else. If you're new here, hi, welcome. My name is Kate. I'm a 30-year-old living in Brisbane, Australia, and I've recently started up this YouTube channel to try to share my life experiences with the rest of you. I have around 10 general cruise tips for you today, and at the end I also want to go through the drinks package and some of the little hidden bits and pieces that we didn't necessarily realise when we were booking it, and what we thought of it and whether or not we think it was worth it. By we, I mean myself and my partner, Simon. He's not in this video, but he was in the cruise vlogs. So if you want to go and check out our cruise vlogs, it was a 3-part series of our 7-day cruise to Cairns and Airlie Beach that we took at the end of October. We did sail with P&O Australia and we sailed on the Pacific Encounter. So some of these tips may be specific to P&O, they may be specific to cruising in Australia, they may even be specific to the Pacific Encounter. This was our first cruise, so I have nothing to compare it to. So let's get into the tips. Tip number 1. As someone who really needs glasses and can barely see without them, means that I have to shower while being mostly blind unless I want to waterlog my glasses. Yeah, something that took me a while to realise. There are 2 taps in the shower, but these taps were not hot and cold. One of the taps was actually the temperature, and it had little temperature numbers on it, which I had to go and get my glasses while the water wasn't running to go and be able to see that. It has a little temperature number on it, so you can choose what temperature you want your water set to. And then the other one is your water pressure. So you can actually choose those 2 things independent of each other. Seems like a much better system than a hot and cold tap. These cruise ships are very advanced apparently. So yeah, if you're like me, or if you're someone who just doesn't look at the taps and just assumes one is hot and one is cold, may not be the case. Again, not sure if that's on all cruises or if that's on all cruise ships, but that's how our cruise ship was. Tip number 2. The second tip is another shower related tip. So we did go out before the cruise, we bought some of those little mini bottles that you get your mini shampoo and conditioner in, and we put shampoo and conditioner into those bottles, and also a shower gel bottle just in case. We figured they would probably have stuff available, but we weren't 100% sure. So we did take our own stuff. They did have a couple of options that they provided. So they had a conditioning shampoo. So it was a combined shampoo and conditioner type deal. And they also had a shower gel bottle available in the shower. These were quite large, so they really would have done more than enough for the 7 days. Since we had gone to the trouble of packaging our own, we mostly used our own because it would have been slightly better quality. But there was the option there if you didn't take your own. If you are worried about having to take your own, you don't have to take your own. There will be stuff there available. Tip number 3. I learned a lot before we went about power adapters and power plugs while you're on the ship. Some of these ships are made all over the world. They're then refurbished somewhere else in the world, finally making their way to Australia, where again they may be refurbished for a 3rd or more times. So you don't really know what sort of power plugs you're going to get. So we did go and buy ourselves from Amazon a little universal travel adapter. Theoretically, it can go into any type of power plug, and then you can plug any power plug that you have into it. So you can convert from US to Australia, you can convert from UK to Australia, you can convert from UK to US if you want. You can make any sort of conversion. It also has a few USB ports on it. I haven't actually tried it out because we didn't need it in the end. It turned out they had a fair few Australian power plugs in the room itself. There were also lamps on either side of the bed, and those lamps had USB plugs in it. So I didn't even really need a power point for anything else. I just used the USB plug for charging my phone most of the time. But there were also additional Australian plugs available throughout the room, so you shouldn't have any issues with that unless you were planning on charging 10 different devices all at the same time. Tip number 4. So we chose the option ahead of time to have P&O schedule all of our dinners at their free restaurants. I highly recommend doing this. It's really easy to change once you're on board. You can use the app to choose which places you want to go to for dinner. You may have more limited options once you're on board the ship, because of course everyone else has been booking in as well. But there is an option through the P&O cruise dashboard website ahead of time to choose your automatic rotation through the restaurants. This is a really great option. They do only give you a couple of time slot options when you're doing that. I think you either have to go early dining, which was 5:30, which is what we did, or late dining, which was probably around 8 p.m. We did the early dining. We usually eat around 6 o'clock anyway, so having a 5:30 reservation wasn't particularly early for us. It just made it so much easier. We didn't have to worry about our dinners. It was all sorted and ready to go ahead of time, which is fantastic. Tip number 5. In regards to that, although we did book everything ahead of time and we thought we had everything organized, when we first got on board, our dinner reservations weren't showing up in the app. So I was a bit concerned something had gone wrong there, but don't worry, it does just take a while for that to show up. They will also deliver a piece of paper to your room that shows where all of your dinner reservations are, what times everything's reserved. They'll bring that to your door, and it will eventually update in the app to say where you're going for dinner each night. I think ours may have even taken a full day. It wasn't until after our first dinner that our reservations actually showed up on the app. So I'm really glad we got that piece of paper on the first night, or we would have been very concerned going to our first dinner. Tip number 6. Something to keep in mind is that even if you don't necessarily get seasick, there is the risk of anxiety-induced unease. I didn't actually get particularly seasick. I may have gotten slightly seasick a couple of times, but what was worse for me was just the anxiety that I had around some of the movement of the ship, the sounds that the ship was making, particularly on the nights where it did get a bit rougher. There was one point where the ship was tilted at an angle. It was a very slight angle, but it was definitely a noticeable angle that we were tilted at. And we stayed at that angle for a while. Now I'm sure they had everything under control, but I do suffer from quite a bit of anxiety, and particularly catastrophizing, where I take something small and make it into something massive. Those small things, there were a lot of sounds, creaking happening, a lot of like wind blowing directly into the ship. Yeah, just the rocking did make me a little bit anxious, which I think made that sort of slight seasickness feeling a little bit more disturbed than it would have been if I just didn't have anxiety. So just something to keep in mind for my anxious friends out there. I do recommend taking seasickness tablets, regardless of whether or not you think you're going to get seasick. Tip number 7. Now this is in regards to checking in on the P&O dashboard ahead of time. When you go to do your P&O check-in, especially if you're checking in multiple people, make sure you have everything ready to go for your check-in. That includes your photos. So you need to take a nice little headshot style passport almost photo of yourself as part of your check-in. You can be smiling and stuff. It's not as strict as the Australian passport photo rules, but you do have to have that bit of a very zoomed in photo of just your face. Make sure you have that ready to go. I checked in for both myself and Simon, and I didn't have the photos ready. We figured we'd just take them a little bit later and that'd be fine. But when I went to log back in and add the photos, it wouldn't let me edit Simon's check-in, so I couldn't add his photo back onto his check-in. We did eventually have him log in so that he could add it himself. By the time we got around to doing that, it had already closed off the check-in. So obviously we were just a little bit late, as we often are. I just recommend having all of that stuff ready to go from the get-go. If you're checking in for 2 people, you also want to add your credit/debit cards separately. There was an option to just link Simon's card to the same credit card that was on my account, but this didn't actually work. When we got to the actual ship check-in, we had to go through the slow lane because we didn't have the information ready, and one of those things was that the card wasn't linked to Simon's account, even though I had set it up to be the same as mine. So I recommend actually linking a card to the second account manually. Tip number 8. Also with the online check-in, make sure that you can fully complete your check-in before you print your tickets. Your physical ticket will show a tick if you are ready to go, or a question mark if you have missed anything at all. We had the question marks, but in the end I had actually uploaded everything that was needed for my check-in. I just printed the tickets before I had that completed. That meant we had to go in the slow lane. They had to retake my photo. It was a whole deal, but I recommend having everything ready to go, doing your check-in and printing your tickets once your check-in is finalized. Tip number 9. The entertainment staff is truly there to entertain you. They will do anything to entertain you, including dancing in their underwear, as we learnt while we were on board. They had a fantastic, spectacular show at the end of the cruise where all of the entertainment staff were involved, and they were all doing some very embarrassing things, but it was absolutely hilarious. Everybody watching had a fantastic time. Tip number 10. Either take a lanyard with you or buy one. I highly recommend having a lanyard while you're on board. Your cruise card, which acts as your credit card, your ID, your room card, basically everything while you're on board. Those have a little slot in them that you can put a lanyard chain into. You then just have your card around your neck at all times. You can scan it to get your drinks. You can open your door with it while it's all within extremely easy access. I highly recommend. I didn't have any at home, but I bought one while I was on board. There are plenty available. So I had a nice P&O themed lanyard with my P&O card on it wherever I went, which was very nice. Highly recommend having a lanyard. It was an absolute lifesaver. Tip number 11. On board the P&O Pacific Encounter, there was a shop that was the New Zealand ice cream shop. You do not need to get one sundae per person. You can definitely get a sundae to share. They were absolutely massive. I did not finish mine. I think Simon just barely finished his. Highly recommend getting those to share. They weren't super expensive, but we definitely could have done it at half the price and still had a very enjoyable dessert. Number 12. One thing I tried to ask when we first went to one of the free restaurants was how the restaurants worked. The person just sort of laughed at me and walked away. I'm not sure he fully heard what I was saying. But something you need to be aware of when going on your cruise is that the free restaurants are only free if you stick to one entree, one main, and one dessert. I have heard through other research that there is ways to get around that. You can get a main meal that they do as an entree. If you want 2 of the mains, you can get one as an entree size, stuff like that. But definitely stick to the entree, main, and dessert. We did ask on one night if we could get a 3rd dessert between the 2 of us. They just said yes and went on with it. We didn't realize that them saying yes meant that we had to pay for that dessert. It was only $3, so we're not going to complain. It was a very cheap dessert and we got 3 desserts between the 2 of us, which was lovely. But just keep in mind that even if they do say that yes, you can do it, doesn't mean that it doesn't come with an extra charge. Tip number 14. Now this may be a slightly cheating one because I did hear this elsewhere. Something that you may find in your own research and something that you may, if you go through and actually read through all of your terms and conditions, cruisers can stop at different ports. They can change which ports they're going to. They can skip ports, all depending on weather and other certain circumstances. I would assume all cruisers around the world would have this in their terms and conditions, that they reserve the right to make any changes to the ports that you are visiting. I haven't, however, heard of anyone having the extreme change that we had. We were supposed to be travelling to Vanuatu and New Caledonia, which are 2 separate countries in the Pacific Ocean. Unfortunately, there was a cyclone, which obviously is a completely reasonable reason to change direction. But instead we went to Cairns and Airlie Beach, which are in Australia. We completely changed the countries that we were going to. While we realised there may have been a chance that we would end up skipping a port or 2, we never thought that we would end up in a completely different country. Obviously it was our own country, but it was very different to what we had imagined. So be prepared for change. There were some other changes throughout our stay as well. We had paid tickets to the show that they had on board, which was supposed to be for one night. They ended up changing the night that we had it booked for. We still got to see the show. That was all good, but it did change the night that it was on, which obviously very slightly changed our plans. We didn't have a lot planned, so it wasn't a big deal for us, but just stay aware of that. And there was also an issue with one of the restaurants that we were booked in at, and they couldn't serve any hot food one night. So we ended up going and buying ourselves some pizza, which you would definitely have the option of taking other free choices, but we chose to get the pizza because that was one of our favourite things that we ate on board. So just be aware of anything that could change. Obviously, this is a ship in the middle of the ocean. Things can happen, things can go wrong, and yeah, small things like an oven being broken, there's not really any way to fix that easily on board. So just be aware of those changes. All right, now let's talk drinks package. So we got the premium drinks package while we were on board, which meant that we got all sorts of soft drink and cocktails and juices and everything all included. We didn't have any tea and coffee included, but I don't really drink tea or coffee, and Simon was happy to drink the cheap coffee that you get for free at the Pantry, which is the buffet style restaurant, which is 100% free. Everything there is free. This package we got bundled into our cruise when we purchased the whole thing, so it got a bit of a discount as getting everything all together. So I'm not 100% sure how much we paid for each of us for the drinks package. But if you look on the P&O website now, that premium drinks package is listed at $99 per person per day. Now, some things that we didn't realise when we purchased the drinks package are some of the restrictions that it has. So it is only for cocktails and alcoholic drinks that cost up to $16. Now, majority of the drinks on board are $16. I don't even think there were any that were less than $16 as far as the cocktails are concerned, but there were a couple of like 18 and 20 or more dollar cocktails. So it wasn't a big deal, but just something that we didn't realize that was part of the restrictions around that. The other restriction was that you could only have 15 alcoholic drinks within a 24-hour period. 15 alcoholic drinks within 24 hours is quite a lot of alcohol. Let's be honest, we were never planning on drinking more than 15 drinks in a 24-hour period. But again, it was just another restriction that we weren't aware of when we booked. So just a couple of things to make sure that you are aware of. Now, as far as our experience with the drinks package, I really liked that we didn't have to worry about how much anything was costing. Obviously, everything we used our cruise card for anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference to the difficulty of having to pay for it, whether it was on our drinks package or not. We would have just used our cruise card regardless. But it was really nice knowing that every time I went and bought a drink, it wasn't actually costing me anything extra. We think we averaged around 6 drinks per day. Basically, every drink that we bought was a $16 cocktail. So 6 drinks a day at $16 per drink came to $96 for each of us per day. Considering the drinks package cost $99 per person per day, it was a pretty reasonable amount that we came to. And that was our average. Some days we had more, some days we had less. But we were pretty happy with how that came out, especially because our drinks package was bundled in with the cruise, so it would have probably cost less than $99 per person per day when we bought it. We got a bit of a discount by buying everything all together at the same time. So really, as far as value for money is concerned, in terms of what we drank versus what we spent on the drinks package, it probably came out about even. We did discuss, though, we are looking at our next cruise being a cruise to New Zealand, which is something like 14 nights and spends maybe 5 or 6 days in ports. For that, we don't think it would be worth it. $99 per person per day when you're spending days on shore doesn't really seem to add up to us. When we went on this trip, we didn't actually spend a lot of time on shore. We weren't planning on spending much time on shore in New Caledonia and Vanuatu. Instead, we went to Cairns. We spent 2 days in Cairns, so we spent one of those days fully on the ship, and one day we went out into Cairns where we bought our own drinks out at restaurants. And in Airlie Beach, we only went onto Airlie Beach for a few hours before coming back onto the ship. But New Zealand is somewhere that we both really want to visit, and I'm sure we would be going out much more and exploring these places that we're going to be stopping at. So obviously, the drinks package is going to be very individual for whether or not it's worth it. No person on the internet can tell you whether or not the drinks package is worth it for you. And obviously, all of the cruise lines have different packages. Some of them have no restrictions whatsoever. Some of them have heavier restrictions. Some of them are completely different prices. So it really depends on you and how much you were planning on drinking, what sort of drinks you're planning on getting. Obviously, things like beers, wines, basic spirits, and mixers would have been cheaper than the cocktails that we were buying. Cocktails were all around that $16 price point. So just have a think about how much you're planning on spending on alcohol, how much you're planning on drinking, and how much you're planning on being on shore. You can't just choose to have your drinks package for 5 days out of a 10-day cruise. You have to have it for the full cruise, but you pay per day. So just think about all of those things. The other thing that was good for us was just the peace of mind of not having to worry about how much extra we were spending on alcohol, because it was all already included, and just knowing that that extra cost wasn't going to be there at the end was very nice to have. But I think as you get into those longer cruises, it becomes less and less valuable. So that's our view on the drinks package, and that's our tips from the cruise. We did have a fantastic time on our cruise. We really enjoyed it. Would highly recommend taking a cruise if it's something that you're interested in. We really enjoyed going with P&O. Obviously, there are a lot of cruise companies out there, so do your research, find what you think works best for you. For us, P&O is the main one that has cruises that we want that go out of and come back to Brisbane. So if we do this New Zealand cruise that we've been looking at, that would be with P&O again, because there's no other cruises that do what P&O do out of Brisbane. So we would have to fly to somewhere else and then get on our cruise, which is obviously an added expense of the flights. When it's unnecessary, we could just go with P&O. And we really enjoyed having a balcony room ourselves, but again, that's quite personal. If you think that you're going to be spending a lot of time just out around the ship, we obviously went out a lot, but we did enjoy having a place to come back to, sit on the balcony, read, and I really enjoyed having the access to the private balcony for views. Otherwise, I would have had to be competing with people up on the top decks for who gets to stand and look at the lovely view of the city arriving or the horizon just going past. So it was really nice to have access to that private viewing space for us. But yeah, that was our experience with the cruise. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're interested in those cruise vlogs, I will be linking to them at the end of the video as well. I have a few more videos coming up towards the end of this year. I'm going to be doing a review of all the books that I read in 2023, and we're also going to be taking a look at everything that I bought on Black Friday sales. And then I am going to be doing a health/life challenge in January, which I'm making a 30-day challenge. So if you're interested in following along with that, I'll be doing vlogs throughout the full 30 days. If you're interested in following along with that, don't forget to subscribe. And you can follow me over on Instagram for any day-to-day and photo sharing. Hopefully I will see you again soon. Bye.